Snow White was the first full-length cel-animated feature film, as well as the earliest adapted Disney animated feature. We all know the beloved characters, from Snow herself to Dopey, Doc, and Sneezy, but Disney didn't come up with the story of Snow White on his own. Let's discuss the origins of the fair and beautiful Snow White. Snow White is a 19th century fairy tale originating in Germany. In 1812, in the first edition of the Grimm's Fairytales, it was story number 53. The fairy tale by the Grimm brothers is reminiscent of the Disney movie we've all come to know and love, with elements we recognize like the magic mirror, poisoned apple, and a glass coffin. But how close to the original did Disney keep his movie? The answer is kind of. At the beginning of the original story, it opens on a winter night, with a queen sitting at a window in her castle, sewing while watching the snow fall. The queen pricks her finger with a needle, causing 3 drops of blood to melt into the fresh snow on the black windowsill. The queen sees this and says to herself, "How I wish I had a daughter that had skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as night." Some time passes, and it's revealed that the queen has given birth to a princess. The queen unfortunately dies in childbirth, but not before naming the child Snow White. The king eventually remarries. His new wife is beautiful, but vain and wicked, and is known for practicing witchcraft. This new queen owns a mirror, a magic mirror. Each morning, the queen gazed into the mirror and repeated, "Magic mirror on the wall, who is the fairest one of all?" The mirror aptly tells the queen each time that she is the fairest of them all. But the queen notices that as Snow White ages, she gets more and more beautiful. Eventually, when asked the question, the mirror reveals that Snow White is the fairest in the land. The queen becomes filled with rage and her hatred against Snow White grows. The queen hires a huntsman who is ordered to bring Snow into the woods to kill her. He is also instructed to receive her lungs and liver for the queen to consume to gain her beauty. The huntsman finds that he cannot finish the job and allows Snow to flee into the woods, and brings back the lungs and liver of a boar instead. Snow finds her way to the home of the dwarves, and is granted refuge by the men, who warn her to remain vigilant while they are working, and warn her again not to allow anyone in the cottage. The queen finds that Snow is still alive and decides to kill the girl herself. As an old peddler woman, the queen offers Snow some colorful silky bodices as a gift, and laces her up so tightly that Snow faints. The dwarves return in the nick of time and loosen the laces, saving her life. The queen returns, this time as a comb seller. She brushes Snow's hair with a poisoned comb and Snow faints again. The dwarves luckily return home in time and remove the comb from her hair, saving her. Finally, the queen returns as a farmer's wife and offers Snow an apple. Snow is hesitant, but when the queen eats half of the apple herself, Snow is convinced and eats her half, the poisoned half. Snow falls to the ground, and this time the dwarves are unable to revive her. They assume she's dead and place her in a glass casket. Days later, a prince appears, and he finds Snow White in her glass coffin. After hearing her story, the dwarves allow the prince to take Snow White with him, to put her in a proper resting place. While they are transporting Snow White, one of the prince's men slips and loses his balance. This jostling dislodges the piece of poisoned apple from Snow White's throat, and she's revived. In an earlier version, the apple is dislodged by one of the prince's servants actually hitting her body. Snow White and the prince marry quickly after her brush with death, but the queen is still convinced Snow is dead, until of course she asks the mirror her question, and is told the prince's bride is the fairest. Not knowing that the bride is Snow White, the queen goes to the wedding to investigate and is quickly thrown into a rage. The prince, rightfully threatened by the woman, orders that she wear a pair of red-hot slippers and shall dance in them until she dies for her attempted murder of Snow White. Not exactly the wholesome and charming Disney classic we've all come to know, is it? What are some of your favorite dark fairy tale origins? Thank you so much to my patrons who get each of these Mini Moments episodes at least a day early. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.